So I suppose first thing to say is welcome back home.
Thank you.
And I've heard you in some other interviews talk about home, coming home to visit as like coming back to the harbour.
The harbour.
So
the place from which you sail.
Yes. So welcome to the harbour. And we're really delighted that you let Docs Ireland have this screening, because I know Dogwoof are very kind of, they hold it tightly. So you are from Belfast. You spent your formative years here.
Yeah.
And lived here till you were 17 or 18. And in my quest to summarise you, I did a bit of reading, and this is the one that I thought was best described you. And it was from The Guardian. Colossally well informed, bracingly internationalist, and genuinely educational. And I mean, I think that does summarise a lot of what you do in your work. You're a prolific filmmaker, highly regarded the world over, and I know this from first-hand experience. I've been at events in Toronto and Berlin and different places, and I've been in auditorium where you've been kind of, people have been enthralled, hundreds of people in huge auditoriums have been hanging on your every word, and I've been waiting for you in the corner to take you for wine. So this film that we're looking at today is one of two of your films that featured in Cannes this year, and the other one was The Storms of Jeremy Thomas. And I think that's a huge accomplishment for any filmmaker to have two films in Cannes in 1 year.
Thank
so
you.
I think another round of applause.
Thank you. It was the first time a British or Irish filmmaker had ever two films in Cannes.
I think so.
Rather surprising.
So, needless to say, we're, us in Belfast here in your hometown are very proud of you, and everybody, all the cinema lovers kind of are really, they talk a lot about you and follow your career. The story of film in Odyssey, the story of children in film, women make film, Belfast, which we premiered here, The Storms of Jeremy Thomas, which I mentioned, and The Wonderful Eyes of Orson Welles are just a few of your recent pieces of work. And the last time you were here in QFT was an interview you did with Tom Powers.
Yes.
At Docs Ireland 3, and that was in June 2019. And since then, a lot has happened. We've had the pandemic, it's had a huge impact on the world. And I suppose my first question is, could you tell us about the pandemic and how the various lockdowns affected you personally?
Yes, I could. I was lucky, and lots of people had terrible pandemics, and there was no good way of getting through it. Of course, this confinement, this hibernation, we could use many words. For me, my life had been travel. I felt as if I lived in Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam and Chicago O'Hare, so it was a chance to stop and a chance to refertilize. And I made 3 films, sort of 4 films under lockdown, including this one, and it was a real opportunity for me to get electric, almost to sort of recharge my batteries and try to become more creative.
Okay. And I suppose the next question follows on from that, really. This is a lockdown movie, the story of film A New Generation. Could you maybe share a bit of the creative process and how you came up with the idea, what your process was around coming up with the structure?
Yeah, I could. And I've made, as some of you know, I've made films, and well, Michele, I've made films about movies and the history of cinema before, and so I wasn't new to this process, but my actual method, I've brought some of my primitive scribbles here. My method is, first of all, to just try to think of 20 or 30 great scenes for a film. The great David Lynch says, think of 20 or 30 great scenes. Another great American filmmaker, Howard Hawks, says, have some good scenes and don't annoy the audience the rest of the time. Both of these are good advice. So what I did in the case of this film was just to scribble on these bits of paper. There you go, Michele. Okay. I've scribbled scenes that I thought would be good, film clips or just moments. So what it says here, you can't see, but it says here in the front bit of paper that I scribbled on, the story of film and update. It was before I knew the proper name of the film. The next thing says just one word, Frozen. So I knew I wanted to get Frozen in there for all those frustrated parents who are tearing their hairs out because of Frozen. But you'll see Frozen isn't the first clip in here, it's the second clip after Joker. And so I thought it would be the first, so that's how things change in the edit. The next clip says source code. It's not a film that I used at all. The next piece of paper says drama, and I thought I would go into drama first. So it turns out that this wasn't very accurate, this way of working. But if you scribble on bits of paper as a filmmaker or a novelist or anyone, then it's such a fast and liberating way of thinking that I certainly recommend it highly rather than going straight to the Word document. Once I've finished with this, then I transfer it to I sort of write it out as a big long thing. So this is the big long thing in this case. And there it says Story of Film a New Generation. It's got its proper title by this stage. And then it says Intro Sleeping. Now I thought we would start with sleeping people. And we didn't, but you saw a few sleepers in there. One of them, if you're eagle-eyed, was Tandy Newton. Did you notice her? She was in there, you know. And she just sent me a film of herself sleeping. But this then was the running order, and it says comedy there, and we do start with comedy, and then it says action next, and we do go into action. So currently, 20 minutes in, we are there. So we've got all that to go still, you know. But this is a very useful document in the edit suite, because you stick that on the wall, and it means you don't get lost when you're editing. You think, okay, we're there, we've already done that bit, and your eye can flick between that bit and that bit, and it's so valuable to do that. So that's roughly my method.
And is that like your rough cut there on paper?
That's the rough cut there, exactly.
Okay. Could you say a wee bit about the opening scene? I know you mentioned it there, but choosing to juxtapose Frozen with the Joker.
I hope some of you got a giggle out of Froker and Josen. Yeah, you know, there are a number of things there, Michelle. I want to show that I'm not snobby. So it's going to be about mainstream cinema as well as arty-farty cinema and everything in between, you know, the pleasure of the range of cinema. You also want to plunge into the story. I'm lucky enough to be friends with David Lynch, and he once said to me, you know, you should float into a story like a balloon floats down to earth, but you can also plunge. And I think if you start with a very controversial film like Joker, it's a kind of plunge. And so that's why I wanted to do those two clips at the start. And then I knew I wanted to look at the films that could have been conventional but weren't, like Booksmart and, you know, like the genre pictures. But as the film goes on, we get into more and more daring material. We're going to see a little bit of that in a minute.
Yeah. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you about, Mark, was a lot of people write about you and they say you extend the map of cinema. And I think that's always a bit of a mission with you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any countries in the world that you didn't include that you would have liked to have included? I should tell people there's 96 films in the finished piece, so you cover quite a lot of ground. But are there any that you've missed out and you really? Yeah,
loads. I mean, I'm always passionate about putting lots of Indian cinema in anything that I do, you know, because Indian cinema is like a third of cinema or something, and it's so great and it's so vital. And there's quite a lot of Arab cinema in this film, which I'm pleased about because there are loads of very good directors working in Arabic languages. I would say, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of Ireland in here, for example. There's a bit, but not very much. There's very little Britain.
We've had enough for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of countries that aren't in there, you know, and what you want to do is sort of almost drop a pin in the map and dive in there and look at South America or look at Japan or look at India, and at least say to people, I know I'm not being comprehensive, I know I'm not trying to do everything, but there is at least a passionate internationalism in this, and an acknowledgement that in some way cinema is a language for our whole species.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you just before I forget is the sleepers in the film. How did you choose them, and how did you go about getting them?
Well, we had planned to go and film, but then COVID happened, so you can see, you saw a bit of Madrid in there, and I'd filmed that, and there's a bit of New York, and we did a little bit of filming, but not a lot. But I knew this had to have a different feel. COVID felt, in a way, like a kind of terrible sleepwalking of some sort. We were half awake and we were half scared, etc. So I just went on social media, on Twitter, and I said, I'm making this thing. I would love it if you would send me a video of you falling asleep, as if we're all dreaming about movies together. And I thought we'd get 20 or 30, and we got really quite a lot more than that. And what was great, it was from all over the world. I think we got like 200 from India alone. So that's really nice. And we keep seeing these sleepers, and people film themselves in hospital, and they film people of all different ages and backgrounds. It was really touching, and it was all fancy. It's not very technical, but I just thought that sense of togetherness, of a kind of shared shared anticipation of going back to the movies would be touching. And I know you've seen the whole of this film. Thank you for watching it. And towards the end, it gets quite emotional in a way, doesn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. I was absolutely. I mean, some of the scenes we've seen here are powerful, but later on, there's just some of them that I was just totally blown away by.
There's a later section of the film when it stops being about cinema so much, more about who are we, who are we as a species, and so I look at the films that really try to dig into identity and the kind of shared rapture or terror of being alive.
And I like the way you didn't go with country by country. You kind of decided to go genre and do it a bit differently. What made you do that, Mark?
Just because that thing, when you think back to silent cinema, Charlie Chaplin was a citizen of the globe, of the planet, and many people were, and so it's that kind of transgressive, emancipatory aspect of cinema. Of course, our nation matters, and we have many opinions about nation, but there's another side of us that wants to forget what nation we are and just look at other citizens, whether it's seeing what's happening in Afghanistan, the sort of tragedy of the modern moment, or more in a slightly more innocent way, when children play from different countries, they don't have the same language, but they are is the word uninhibited or disinhibited to just play with each other despite their differences. And there's that playful quality in cinema, which I think is very valuable.
There's a question I wanted to ask you about something later on in the film. I kind of don't feel good about asking because people haven't seen it. But it's Oppenheimer and the act of killing, and then the look of silence.
Yes.
And they just, I suppose, growing up here, they both struck me because one of them is a man facing somebody who killed his brother, and that's the look of silence, and then the act of killing. And they're both very powerful pieces of work, and I suppose it struck a chord for me. And the question I have around that is, do you think film has been utilised enough here to kind of support healing? And because we've had many screenings, where victims have been there and there have been pieces of work, and they've said they found it really supported their grieving process. And I just wonder, did you think that there's a place for film there, and do you think it's been used enough here, or is there not?
I think there's definitely a place for that, and I think it has been used a lot. There are a lot of films here that are looking at the recovery process. As we know, healing and recovery happens when you least expect it. You might bump into a friend and you go for a coffee, and suddenly you feel this kind of voltage of aliveness, and it's not related to any, we're not talking about our sadnesses, our traumas, our losses, or anything like that. And as we know, and there's a lot of evidence here in neuroscience that our brains repair themselves when they're not, when you're not specifically trying to address the problem. Yeah. So yes, cinema is great at that, but it's healing to go and see Singing in the Rain on a wet Sunday afternoon.
It is, yes. Okay, I think, so what we're going to do in terms of the questions, because when they told me that we weren't allowed questions, I thought, how can we figure a way to do it?
It's because of COVID, we can't go into the audience,
And we can't pass microphones. So what I'm going to do is I have a burner phone, and we're going to put the phone number up on the screen. And you can text me, and then I think it'll come up at the next part. But I'll give you the number now anyway if you want it. Some of you may already have it. So if we stop there and we watch the next clip.
It's only another 10 minutes and specifically about documentary.
Yeah, so we'll go into the
Or people can just shout out the question as well, can't they? If you've got is that allowed? Or are we not allowed to shout? Oh, you're not allowed to shout for COVID, is that right? Is there a representative of QFT here? Yeah.
Oh, no shouting. No, that's okay.
So
no,
text.
we'll text 079 1211 7162.
You might need to say that if you want.
No, but it will be up. But I'll give you the number now if you want to write it down. But it will be up on the screen. 079.
Is it coming up now or after the 10 minutes?
After the 10
minutes. Okay, let's do the 10 minutes. And
but you can be thinking of your question, and but just to say you'll be able to, because I know there's a load of people in here who will want to ask questions.
Okay, see you in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.